And welcome, everyone, to Sports Talk Line, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. And on today's episode of Battle for the Big East, we got St. John's Athletic Director Mike Cragg here. Mike, how you doing today?
Great, Tom. It's good to see you, and happy you were able to get me on. This is great. Great honor for me.
Yes, I appreciate Mike. He's visiting his daughter, and he's taking time out of his day to speak with me. So I greatly appreciate that. But I think this has been one of the more interesting off seasons in college athletics history. Last year was because of the pandemic. This year, there was a lot of significant rules changes by the NCAA. The first rule, which really impacts basketball or college basketball specifically, is the new transfer rule, where students that haven't transferred before will be able to transfer without sitting out a year. How has this transfer rule impacted St. John's?
Well, and first of all, it has been a wild year of just almost 2 years, really of significant changes in all of college sports, which we'll talk about. And transfer is one of them that, certainly for all of us, transfer rules. So just to go back, has been traditionally was set aside as an opportunity for student athletes to transfer, but sitting out a year in adjustment, and as kind of I think a deterrent, if you will. However, over the years, a number of different sports had different rules. And so most prominently, men's and women's basketball and football sit out a year. But soccer, tennises, golf's immediate eligibility. And so it wasn't a foreign concept to the enterprise of college athletics. And I think, like everything else, the unknown can be scarier than the reality. And again, with the idea that affording the opportunity for student athletes to transfer and just the reality of modern world, no sitting out. And so how it affected us is how it affected everybody. And I think with COVID and the extra year eligibility this year, because just as a recap, also in basketball, that nobody's eligibility was used this past season, and so everybody regained that year. And so I think with that, it became the Wild West, if you will, and so there was a lot of transferring around. Now a one-time transfer rule, just to be clear. The second time somebody wants to transfer, they would have to sit out a year, and there will be very few exemptions. And that's what was going on over the last several years in basketball, where the NCAA was granting basically blanket exemptions to the rule based on a number of different things. So we had a number of kids transfer out. We have had a number of kids transfer in. And so we're excited about the roster that's here. And, I think for me as a fan of college basketball and athletics and been a part of it for 30 some years, I think the hard part about if the betterment of the game, take out everything I just said, but, as far as a fan base, building loyalty, understanding, looking forward to these guys are on my team, it's very hard. Nobody's going to recognize any rosters, period. And I think that hurts the game, honestly, as far as that continuity. But that doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it bad. It just means that when November hits, everybody that loves college basketball, you're going to be learning all new lineups. And then they're still wearing the same jersey. And so that's the great thing about college athletics and the opportunity for education. And so we're real excited. Coach Anderson and staff have done a tremendous job of building the roster. And so it'll have high impact. Long answer for a short question. But like everybody, we're figuring it out, adjusting, and we think there's a lot of advantages of St. John's.
Gotcha. And speaking of one of the other major changes that occurred, has been what we call name, image, likeness, or NIL for short. Personally, I hope I get more college sport games to play. That goes with me. But how has NIL changed the college athletic landscape?
Well, it's changed everything. I mean, the definition of amateurism is a totally different concept than it was 3 months ago. Again, the fear of the unknown, I would say, outweighed the reality. And so now that we're in the reality, we're all competitive. We're all figuring out how it means for our school and how we're a better choice than somebody else in recruiting. And so that'll play out in a lot of different ways. But the bottom line is that all student athletes of every sport have the opportunity to earn money based on, their name, image, likeness. And as I've told our student athletes, St. John's also has its name, image, likeness. And so we work together and figure it out, then it's great. And so it comes with a lot of nuances we can go into. But I think it's a great opportunity for student athletes. It's a great opportunity for schools. We've really taken the approach of how do we afford and better educate our students, all students, but our student athletes who have an interest in this. We started a thing with our Tobin College of Business, and you can get a minor in basically an NIL. It has a different name than that, but personal finance, social branding, personal branding, social media, I should say, a 13 credit minor, which I think we're the first school in the country to do such a thing. And we're excited about it. We have a lot of students that have signed up for it. And I think that's our job as educators, as a university, is how can we help, promote life skills. And running a business and using your own name, image, likeness is entrepreneurial and great for the student athletes.
Yeah, and you kind of answered that because you kind of talked about how St. John's was preparing students before this decision was made. So, but it's also too, one of the things that intrigued me is what role does the college or university play for student athletes? Like, could they be like, I guess maybe a third party that like connects people going for sponsors and stuff like that? Because it's also too, I think students need to, anyone needs to be wary of what contract they sign.
Yeah.
And I think that goes without saying. But how can the university vet people or organizations so that the student athletes are taken care of, or how does the relationship go between the colleges and universities in the NIL, between the student athletes and the third parties?
Yeah, great question. And honestly, it's part of the chaos that we're in right now is every state has different laws. And so we're in an interim stage. In the state of New York, there are no laws, which actually has allowed us to be creative, I think, to the betterment for our student athletes. So how I treat it and what we've treated it, number one thing that's different about college athletics is that student athletes are allowed to have an agent or a business representative, which I think is terrific and really should have been done a long time ago. And so again, you asked the question, how do you vet? Well, they need to vet their families. Who do they want to go in business with? And then not spend their time figuring out the market, have somebody that they're working in business with to figure out the market. That's just smart. And that's what I've told our student athletes. That's your first step, in my opinion. As a parent, as an administrator, as a person who cares about them, they should find somebody to go in business with and where that leads. Number two, to your question, I do think that's how this will emerge and grow, is that like most schools, we have a multimedia agreement with Learfield. And so they have our name, image, likeness rights to be able to put up signs in our stadiums and advertise on our podcasts and our things, radio broadcasts. And so what that then affords is they have a prospective company that says, hey, I'd be interested in having one of your players help amplify our messaging. Okay, here's who you talk to. And so that partnership of everybody, I think is that's the wave of the future. And that makes a lot of sense. And there'll be plenty of things that we're seeing in the early of student athletes doing their own thing. And that's great. But it may come to a point where that student athlete then says, hey, you know what? My company wants me to wear a St. John's jersey in their advertising. Well, then that's what I said at the beginning. That's our NIL. So let's work on that. It's a business arrangement. And there are steps, there are steps to take, as any business would, in licensing St. John's or any other school. And so that's all smart business. And for them to learn that at an early age, great. I mean, it'll prepare them for life and hopefully lead to a lot of great things beyond just being an athlete.
Yeah, I know. Michael Cragg, I just learned something from that too, where it's the player's name by themselves, and then you also have to get the school approval too. So it's almost like if you're coming in and you want someone to wear St. John's gear, you have to have an agreement with said player and also an agreement with the school, which is kind of something that definitely is something worthwhile. And now one of the things that I kind of did, because I guess a little bit of the business person in me too, do you see any of the college athletes incorporating themselves like an LLC or anything like that for tax advantages or something like that, like some other people might do, like some other entertainers?
Yeah, there's no question that they'll come. I'm following it like everybody else. I see Clemson quarterback or Alabama or LSU or those high profile, the twins from Fresno State. I'm sure that they've got in representation business, ways to do things. That's smart. And so answering your DM or whatever in Instagram and signing a deal that's not the way to know your value. And I think that gets a lot of headlines at the beginning stages too, which is great and not a problem. But does that lead to good strong business relationships? Probably not. And so I think the sophistication will grow. And by the way, it's not going to start in college. It's going to start for some of these high profiles in high school.
Yep.
And so, that's great. And it's smart.
Yeah. I believe it's making headlines. They had a quarterback from Texas transfer to Ohio State because Texas does not allow NIL laws, but Ohio State does. So that's something, I don't think moving to SEC saved that recruit from leaving Texas. But I think it's definitely interesting going forward. But speaking about other changes, you had a relationship before you went to St. John's. About how many years were you at Duke University?
So I was at Duke for 31 years in a number of different roles, started in media relations and eventually left there as deputy athletic director under Kevin White and worked for about 20 years in the men's basketball office directly and fundraising and facilities and all that.
Yes. And at that time, they had a coach who won a game or two. His name was Mike Krzyzewski.
Yeah.
And Mike Krzyzewski announced in the summer of blockbuster announcements, Coach Krzyzewski announced he was retiring from Duke after this year. So what was your relationship with Mike Krzyzewski, and how will college basketball be without Coach Krzyzewski?
Well, first of all, we're very close. I mean, definitely the basketball program at Duke is a very family first, just like our program at St. John's with Coach Anderson. And so, things, we did a lot of business together, a lot of relationship building together, and very close as any. And so the relationship has not ended just because I'm a different employer. And so family and friends forever. But that being said, in Coach announcing his retirement, certainly it was very well thought out. It's been something that was, thought about for a long, long time, but the reality became, and that he just felt like the timing was right. And so I'm really happy for him because I know how happy he is in the decision. And it's a change in leadership at Duke with the new athletic director and incoming new basketball coach in John Shire, who will be terrific. And knowing Coach well, though, you said Coach leaving college basketball. He may be leaving the sidelines of college basketball, but I'm pretty sure he'll still be, very involved and certainly supportive of Duke. And he'll be in an ambassador role, he and his wife, Mickey, in supporting Duke and their efforts going forward as a university and certainly as a athletic department. And so I think he'll, for a long time, be on the scene, so to speak, just like other legends, Coach Wood and Coach Smith at Carolina, they don't leave. And they're proud institutions that, are great for college athletics. That's why I love college athletics. They're great educators and teachers first and foremost, and they're great coaches. And obviously Coach K is successful at the very top.
Yeah, and also St. John's has their own living institution in Lou Carnesecca. He's still coming out and to the games with the sweater in hand, to say the least. He's one of the old guards of the Big East. But now with Coach Carnesecca, since we brought him up, how is your relationship with Coach Carnesecca? He kind of always is showing up, and to say the least.
Yeah, well, it's close. It's funny. Well, it's not funny, but the year we've all been through the last 18 months, obviously we didn't get to have much interaction with Coach. But Coach Anderson and I went and had lunch with him probably about 6 weeks ago now, and that was his first time of being able to be out and have lunch in a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously he's vaccinated like we are, and so it was just amazing. And at 96 years old, and Sharp is better than I am at remembering stories and people and history. And, we sat there for 2.5 hours just enthralled, listening and laughing and him telling stories. And so I've had a number of conversations. He follows St. John's basketball very intensely. Mm-hmm. He and Coach Anderson talk probably about once a month, either one or the other call each other. He loves and lives and breathes it, and we are so fortunate to have him with us and Sharp. And I don't know if you know this, but it's worth sharing. We're doing a statue of Coach Carnesecca that we're going to be bringing into the lobby of his arena and dedicating it in October around our homecoming weekend, which is October 22nd and 23rd. And so fans are going to be greeted by Coach Carnesecca for the rest of time. And I just think it's a perfect spot, and we're building out a nice display. And he's a special part of our history, and we are so fortunate. Another person that people may not realize but will remember is one of the founding fathers of the Big East, Jack Kaiser, Mr. Kaiser, at 92 years old, as our AD emeritus, is still sharp as well and follows it closely. So we've got two of the legends of not only St. John's, but of the Big East amongst us, which is amazing.
Yes. Now, I'll give you two more questions. One question will go into the future a little bit. One more, I kind of just want to pick your brain a little bit to see if things are different. So going into the future, how do you see St. John's and the Big East preparing for the future, especially when you kind of see potential changes in conference alignments and all that stuff going forward?
Well, really good question. The one thing through my time, I'm coming up on my 3rd year anniversary at St. John's as athletic director, that we have a great collection of athletic directors and presidents. And so our group is very unified, very communicative. We have a great leader in Val Ackerman as the commissioner. And so, you've got to be forward thinking. You've got to be looking ahead, I think, and tip my hat to the ones that saw UConn as the next step of how to, build strength, and obviously a part of the history of the Big East. And so I think an important addition, from 2 years ago. And so we're studying, we're looking, how do you create in college basketball centric conference where we have a unique spot. A lot of college athletics and realignment and all things you asked about are focused on football. Well, obviously that we're not focused on football. We're focused on basketball. And so we play a leadership role if we are leaders. And we are leaders. And so we're figuring out how to make that the Big East more of a year-round brand, year-round content, and expand our leadership in that sport. And as things unfold, and the constitutional convention of the NCAA, what is the NCAA going to look like? We want to be a part of that leadership. We have an athletic director and a president on that committee. No other conference has two. And we have two. Greg Christopher from Xavier is our representative as athletic director, and Jack Lagoya is the president at Georgetown. And so we have an opportunity and a voice in the room, which is going to be terrific. And so I'm excited about that. And I think it'll lead itself to basketball having, if you will, federated opportunities as kind of a standalone, men's and women's basketball. And again, that's where we can assert leadership and be a part of a change.
Yeah. Now, I do have a follow-up for that, though, too. Do you think the Big East has a strong advantage because they're basketball-centric when it comes to what else is going around, where it's like there are certain profiles they're looking for that they fit in? And do you think that plays an advantage right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think it does for what we all love in March Madness and the basketball tournament and what the future looks like of that. Um, in the big picture, we don't have an advantage over football schools, but we have an advantage in what we care about. And obviously starting with men's basketball and our level of that, and at the highest levels and competing at the Big East level, obviously there's been national championships won from our conference in a lot of sports. For us personally, men's soccer, fencing, we've won national championships in those. In recent time, Georgetown and men's soccer, obviously Villanova and women's and men's basketball. And so there's amazing opportunity to get even stronger. And so we do have an advantage. I think it's something that, Coach Anderson and coming from Missouri and Arkansas, me coming from Duke, football has a big presence in that Power 5 world. As big as Duke basketball is, Duke football plays a prominent role in how Duke is looked at it by the ACC. And so in our case, there's one thing that leads and drives Big East, and that's men's basketball. And we're excited about it.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see going on. And I think you mentioned Duke football. There's a quarterback playing in New York from Duke, but that's a different podcast that I do.
Yeah, that's all right. Daniel Jones. We can say his name.
Yeah, Daniel Jones. But it's also, too, that now the last question I'm going to ask before we go is, this last season, St. John's was picked to finish 9th in the Big East, and they definitely surprised a lot of people, pleasantly surprised a lot of people, to say the least. They decided not to do that NIT, which was understandable given all those situations, but there's a lot of big-time wins for St. John's. Unfortunately, at home, due to the regulations during COVID, fans weren't allowed in. What would be one St. John's game you wish fans were allowed in to see the team play?
Last year
during the pandemic.
Well, I mean, all of them, but I mean, the game that sticks out for me, and where, the style of basketball we play and the home court advantage was, an obvious choice. The Villanova game at home was spectacular, and I think, and where I get excited right now just thinking about it, because I've watched tape with the coaches as they pulled highlights and all that to show recruits and, to promote the season we had. To think we had that level of excitement and energy and pressure and all the things that Coach Anderson basketball is about, with no crowd. I mean, I was one of 6 people in the building. I yelled and I lost my voice, but that doesn't help. And so when I think about a game like that, and really all our games, that what that'll create with our home court and 8 to 10 points a game, it'll fuel on itself. And having a kid like Posh and our brand of basketball, and it's just, I get so charged up. And I just hope all our fans respond and come out and treat it, like it's their team. We have 190,000 alums in the tri-state area. And so for this coming year, I'm real excited about early on having the Kansas game in the first game in the UBS arena. I've toured the building. It's going to be amazing. I just hope it's all red and white and blue, and it's our blue. I mean, red. We do have a trim in blue, not their blue.
Yeah.
I just think it's an unbelievable opportunity to make a statement against a top 5 team. Our crowd come out, and that's who we need to be. We can't worry about how many fans Connecticut brings or Villanova brings. We need to fill buildings with our fans, and we're capable of doing that. And I just think there's, we've got to figure out that, and that's my job, to help promote and season tickets are up, and our single game tickets once our schedule's out, I think are going to do well. But your question about what I got excited about or what we missed last year, we missed the whole year, but the Villanova game was a special one at home and showed what's possible.
Yeah, I definitely think too, when you look at, the history of St. John's and the style of New York City basketball, Posh Alexander is that model, where he's just someone, very, very rarely do you get excited when someone plays defense, but he's one of those guys where, he'll start guarding the opposition's point guard the moment he gets off the bus.
That's right.
He seems to have that personality.
If you go back to what Coach Anderson said at his first press conference, and we introduced him to New York, and obviously not his introduction to college basketball, 18 years, never a losing season, but he talked to exactly what you just said. that's the style of basketball he was going to bring to St. John's.
Mhm.
And Posh exemplifies that. A kid like Julian, has shown that, maybe he wasn't highly recruited, but has grown into now, a potential first-round draft pick in the NBA.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what college basketball is all about. And I'm so excited for what's being built, and, the sky's the limit.
Yes. Now, before we leave, Mike,
Yep.
Can you tell people where we can find you on Twitter? And if you want to, you can give a sales pitch why people should go to St. John's, or maybe give some of the salespeople a shout out.
I don't even know what my handle is on Twitter, but I am on Twitter. I think if you just Google or search my name, is it Mike Cragg, STJ? I really don't even know, but I am on there, and I do try to be pretty active in it. That's what I use as my social media. For St. John's, it's a special time and opportunity that, we just feel like coming out of COVID in New York, a great venue, NIL, the things we talked about, that it's not just men's basketball, but all 17 of our sports, all 340 student athletes. We are excited and thrilled to be back together. And I just think we're on the cusp of a very, very special year in St. John's across the board. And it'll be most visible in men's basketball. And we, Coach said it, I've said it, our mission is to win a national championship in men's basketball, and to be at a Final Four and be a consistent top-level Big East. And if you're consistent top-level Big East, you are contending for a national championship. And that's all. That's what we're here to support and figure out and be behind and have fun doing it. And it doesn't mean you win every game. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but it means the big picture is we're doing things the right way. And we have so much to build on and be proud of. And St. John's people are proud, and we're proud to be a part of it.
All right, everyone at home, if you haven't done so already, click that like and subscribe button to follow Sports Talk Line online. And remember to listen like you play with intensity.